Hello, and thank you for being with us today in this webinar where we're going to look at caregivers in mental health at work. We're going to look at their realities, some of their challenges, and then we're going to talk about some win-win solutions. So, as you probably know, supporting a loved one with a mental health challenge has a real impact, obviously, on personal life, but as well as on professional life and on the organization with which we work. In this webinar, we're going to look at things from two perspectives. We're going to first explore the reality of employees who are caregivers, and then in the second part of this webinar, we're really going to look at the viewpoint of employers, and we're going to present some concrete and accessible solutions so that we can build inclusive and sustainable workplaces that are adaptable to the realities of employees and that are going to respond to the needs of the organizations that we work with. So we're going to learn how to identify the needs of both caregivers and managers, as well as colleagues, to implement flexible measures to recognize the essential role of caregivers without costly investments, whether your organization, whether we're 5, 50, 500 employees. So this is a great opportunity for us to strengthen our team's well-being and to integrate this important dimension into our internal policies for managing psychosocial risks. So to start this webinar, we've got a video that we'd like to present to you right now.
And I'm the Executive Director of the Community Health and Social Services Network, the CHSSN. Our primary mission is to improve access to English language health and social services across the province of Quebec. I think that caregivers are often invisible. They're usually not really seen by the employer as in that role. The employer tends to look at people as what they do for the organization and not necessarily looking at the challenges that they're facing at home. It's not something that we are able to ask questions about when we interview an employee, a potential employee. So it's often something that we discover later once they've started working for us. So the first thing that leadership has to do in an organization is make sure that there are policies in place that can support somebody that's being a caregiver for people with mental health. So that means having paid time off for caregiving duties. It is having an opportunity or having an open door policy so that when the person is having trouble, they can come to their superiors and request support in what they're doing. A caregiver for someone living with a mental illness is often challenged by being the one responsible for identifying when support needs to be given. They have to understand what resources are available. They sometimes have to translate for the person that's suffering from the mental illness, not just linguistically, sometimes it's even culturally or reticence on the side of the person with the mental health problem. Of course, they're going to be probably taking more time off than someone who is not a caregiver. That's the obvious thing. I think more subtly, it's the stress associated with being a caregiver for someone with mental health, the unpredictability of the nature of being that type of caregiver. It actually creates some strong points for the individual as well. They're more, I think, empathetic. They are able to problem solve. They build skills being a caregiver that sometimes are very desirable for an employer as well. Every organization should have a moment where you bring all of your staff together. It's a great opportunity to talk about mental health in general, and also about caregiving responsibilities, and talk about it in an environment that's non-threatening and not singling out people so that they can receive the information without stress. I think we have to take advantage of those opportunities to make sure that we use them to deliver this message. The employees have to feel that what they come to you with, particularly in the area of supporting someone with mental health, will stay with the boss, that they're not going to be bringing that information to other employees in the organization. It's really important that their privacy is respected. So you have to create that environment of trust. And that is something that is earned. It is something that you can't just talk about. You have to be in your leadership. You have to be able to make sure that the individuals feel like they can come to you if there's a challenge. And what I've learned is that you don't have to ask many questions. You really just need to listen. I think that caregivers need to hear that they're super important, that the work that they're doing is important to the health system, it's important to society, it's important to their own families, and we just need to celebrate that.
All right, thank you so much, Jennifer, and for that great video. So I'm going to be your host for this webinar today. My name is David Ford Johnson. I am Executive Director at Arborescence. Arborescence, we are a member of Cap Santé Mentale, and we're a community organization based in Montreal, and we offer individual and group services to caregivers of mental health. And since about 2019, we've been offering services to attack mental health in the workplace. So it's a pleasure for me to be here, and I'm delighted to be accompanied by two guests. Today we have Jennifer Johnson.
Hi. Yeah, so I had already introduced myself in the video, but just to add to that, our organization specializes in promoting access to health services, and mental health has always been identified as a priority for many communities across the province. And of course, this issue around the people that care for individuals with mental health, is something that we haven't talked about enough. And I'm really glad that I'm here today to do that. And I also have, 20 plus years experience as a leader in an organization. So I think I'm happy to share my experience with everyone today about that.
Well, Jennifer, we're happy to have you here. So thank you so much. And also we have Maude McAllister that is with us today. Maude?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Maude, and I'm a psychosocial worker for Arborescence. I've been working here for almost 2 years, 4 years, and I have experience, working with caregivers in mental health. So I mostly offer individual and group support, and I also do workshops on mental health. So I'm here today really to bring like a perspective based on my hands-on experience with caregivers in mental health, and I'm really happy to be here today.
Great. Well, so glad to have you. And so as you can see, we have both kind of the employer perspective in Jennifer, and kind of the caregivers, or really the field perspective with Maude, who has been working in our organization for the last couple of years. So let's go on to the first segment of our webinar. And to begin, let's take a look at caregivers, at their reality, at their needs, what's sort of going on in their lives. And so Maude, given the last couple of years, the experience that you've got in the field, kind of put us in context here. Who are caregivers of people living with mental health difficulties?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, caregivers can be coming from different backgrounds, and they can have different roles. So we see a lot of parents who are caregivers to a child. It could be a younger one, an adult living with mental health issues. It could be children who grew up with a parent that has mental health issues. They could be partners, siblings, friends, colleagues, neighbors, really. Anyone that is close to someone living with mental health issues. And what we see also is that their realities are very different according to different factors, including personal factors, like how old they are, where do they live? Do they live in a big city? Do they live in a more rural region? What kind of services they have access to? How old is their loved one? What's the relationship with the loved one? So there's not like one typical caregiver, we see that there's a lot of different situations, different realities, and it's really like an individual perspective. We also see some common points, which we'll discuss later on. But yeah, I think the main point to remember here is that caregivers come from different backgrounds and they have different realities.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that. And initially, maybe we can think that caregivers of people living with mental health difficulties is kind of niche, and there aren't very many, or that it doesn't impact us directly. But it's important for us to remember that 1 in 5 people live with mental health difficulties, and if 1 in 5 live with mental health difficulties, that probably means that 1 in 5, or 2 in 5, or 3 in 5, or even more are caregivers of people living with mental health difficulties. And so, probably everyone around, we know someone around us that's dealing with a mental health or has dealt with a mental health difficulty. And so, explain to us a little bit, what is a role of a caregiver of people living with mental health difficulties?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and just to bounce off what you just said, like a lot of caregivers don't really identify as caregivers. So there's a lot of people who are in the role of caregiving for someone who has mental health issues without recognizing that posture. And yeah, to answer your question about the role, I think, again, there's not just one role that a caregiving person can take. I think the general role is to offer support to their loved one within their own capacity and within what makes sense for them to offer. So it will look different for everyone. I mean, the role of the parent of a 16-year-old living at home that's struggling with mental health will not be the same kind of role compared to like a 40-year-old supporting a friend that doesn't live with them and that's been struggling with mental health issues periodically for many years. So the roles are going to look different for everyone. And yeah, basically, what we know is that for a person struggling with mental health issues, social support from friends and family is a protection factor. And to be able to be a protection factor as a caregiver, we have to take care of ourselves and find some kind of balance in all aspects of our life, including caregiving, work, family. So I think the role of caregivers is, yes, to offer support, but also to find a balance that allows them to be supportive without forgetting about themselves.
I'd imagine that's got to be pretty difficult to, when you have somebody that you love and that you're close to and that's dealing with a mental health difficulty. I'd imagine it's got to be pretty difficult to know how to toe that line and how to be involved, but to keep a certain distance so as to protect oneself. I'd imagine that's, seems pretty easy to say, but that it's probably not very easy to do.
No, exactly. It's not easy to do, and it's normal to not be able to do it by yourself. So that's why reaching out for help, reaching out for services as a caregiver can be really helpful, because when you're in a situation, a caregiving situation, and it gets really stressful and difficult, it's hard to take a step back and have that distance to maybe look at the situation differently. So yeah.
Well, and so listen, what we're kind of talking about is their reality. And so what are some of their principal difficulties that they may live, difficulties that caregivers may live, some of the needs that they may have? Sort of talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So in general, caregivers, well, when they come into our services, what they usually ask for is to understand mental health better. They want to understand their loved ones' mental health issue better. They want to set boundaries. They want to understand how to communicate better with their loved one. They also want to feel like they're not alone. They want to feel like other people are experiencing the same thing as them. And they also want to support their loved one without burning out. That's a need that we hear a lot in our practice, but they want to find a balance to be able to keep supporting their loved one without jeopardizing their own mental health. Yeah, so that's what I was talking about before. Like, it can be difficult to do that, and that's why services exist for that. And also, something that we see a lot is how the caregiving posture can have impacts, yes, on the relationship with your loved one, but also on different aspects of your life, like in the workplace, for example. So, for example, there was a survey this summer that Cap Santé Mentale did. So within 150 caregivers that answered to that survey, 87% of respondents feel like the role of a mental health caregiver is poorly recognized in society, and 90% of them see their caregiving role as a major source of stress. That's also something that we see a lot in our practice, how it is stressful to support someone that has mental health issues. And we all work the same, but when we have too many sources of stress in our daily life, it's hard to function properly. So it's normal to see that the mental or emotional overload will have impact on our ability to be present at work, to be productive, to be present for other relationships, and to take care of ourselves. So yeah, the impacts can be very large.
Well, and so, I mean, what we talk about is that it's an invisible role, and this is kind of something that Jennifer talked about in the video. You know, when we hire somebody, we don't necessarily know a lot about their personal lives, and we live in a culture in which there's a very clear sort of distinction between I'm an individual in the morning and I wake up and I have my family, or I have my pets or my friends, and then I go to work and all of a sudden I'm somebody else because I'm a professional and I have professional responsibilities, and then my workday ends and I put back on my family mask or my friend mask or my social mask, and that can sometimes make invisible what it is that we may live in the morning or in the evenings or on the weekends, but that very clearly we're sort of the same person in the morning and in the evening and at work. And yes, we have different roles that we have to adopt in those contexts, but being a caregiver can be a pretty invisible role, but you know, like you said, it can have a huge impact on how we may feel at work or on our availability to participate in meetings or in projects at work. And so it seems that it's a pretty important thing to attack and for us to consider in the workplace.
Yes, definitely. And also, what we see a lot is that people who are caregivers in mental health don't always recognize those impacts. Like they can see that they feel a lot of stress at work, they're having trouble focus, having trouble being productive, but the link between the stress that's coming from that relationship, that caregiving situation, is not always clear to them. So that also brings in the feeling of guilt, which a lot of the caregivers that answered to the survey did mention as well, feeling guilty. That like, and also sometimes not feeling like they're doing enough is also something that we see a lot.
So in today's world, you know, where there is more and more that is asked of us at work, you know, we have high demands to be productive. We also have high expectations to be socially involved in different activities, in active life on social networks, where we also have high demands when it comes to relationships with our family and with loved ones. We talk about burnout a lot at work. Among the impacts that came out of the survey from the summer, 58% mentioned burnout. So they can be sort of relational burnout or burnout due to sort of mental or emotional overload. Man, it seems like we ask a lot of ourselves, especially people that are caregivers in mental health.
Yes.
So, listen, thank you so much, Maude, for helping us understand a little bit more about caregivers and their reality and their needs. One which that really sets the table, because here we wanted to talk again sort of about caregivers and their needs, some of what they're going through. But we know that you're also here so that we can now kind of step into the role of, okay, in the workplace, what do things look like from the workplace perspective? Employers, what's their role? What are their responsibilities? How can workplaces consider caregivers? And so, Jennifer, why don't you step in a little bit into our conversation? So, kind of generally speaking, what roles or responsibilities do employers have before caregivers of people living with mental health difficulties?
So, as an employer, there's a couple of really key roles that we can play in supporting our employees in their roles as a caregiver. We have a couple of tools in our toolbox as well that help us with that. The first thing is the employee manual, the document that hopefully every employee gets when they get to an organization. And in that manual, an employer can describe what it is that they have as an offering of support for the employees that they have. And so in that, every organization is different, every set of support networks are different, but in that document, you should be able to find, if you have health benefits that include mental health services, and you should be able to find, how to access those resources in your group benefits as an employee. So that's one tool. The second would be, has the employer identified caregiving responsibilities as being eligible for paid days off? The CNSST recommends that an organization have at least, I think it's 1 day that's dedicated towards caregiving, but it's up to the employer to determine how many days they can afford to include into that category for an employee. So the employee manual will help you understand, what is available to you in terms of paid time off and how much time you can take off without pay as well. The CNSST identifies 10 days unpaid as being eligible for caregiving responsibilities. And of course, if you're going to be taking off that much time, you actually have to get a recognition of yourself as being a caregiver. But that document is something that an employer really needs to produce, and the employee needs to use as a resource. So that's sort of like the basics in terms of what an employer needs to provide. The second thing I think that I would say links back to the video that we watched earlier, where I was saying, it's creating an environment where the discussions can be held. As an employer, it's our responsibility to ensure that there is a policy, not a policy, but an open door feeling within the organization that an employee can come to the supervisor and discuss challenges that they're facing with regards to their caregiving responsibilities. And so it's really up to the employer to make sure that the employees understand that they can do that. So here I'm talking mostly to the employers in terms of what they need to do. But it's something that you have to be intentional about it. It's not something that just will happen by osmosis. It's something that you actually have to be intentional about. And staff meetings are often a great place to start that culture within your organization. It's creating an environment where it's safe to talk about caregiving responsibilities and mental health impact and all of those elements that come along. Does that make sense?
Yeah, most certainly does. I mean, what you're talking about is sort of creating a space in which employees feel as if they can sort of be fully who they are. It's because if I know that I'm a caregiver and I know that I can't talk about it in the workplace, like it's this invisible role and this invisible weight that I'm carrying, but that I carry it anyways. And that I think that, you know, because it's invisible and because I can't talk about it, it almost seems like it adds additional weight onto my situation. Whereas if I can just sort of be who I am fully and say, yes, okay, I have these additional responsibilities, and I would love for them not to have an impact on my workplace, but sometimes they do. And that doesn't make me a bad employee. That just makes me a human being that's sort of going through what I'm going through. And that if I can have this understanding that my employer is going to understand me and these different realities, and is going to make visible this sort of additional weight or these responsibilities that are on my shoulders. You know, I mean, I feel like what you're saying, Jennifer, is that this really makes a huge difference in how I can sort of emotionally live through that experience at work, even if it doesn't necessarily fundamentally change or fix, obviously, the mental health problem of my loved one, right?
No. Yeah, that yes. And it's understanding the role of an employer can, you know, play. I mean, it's pretty limited in terms of, you know, the experience that the employee is going through, but it is providing support, providing resources, providing you know, the knowledge of how to navigate the resources that are available. And actually something I forgot to mention is, you know, being flexible with regards to you know, the time off that you know, I have to go to an appointment for an hour, I will work an hour later, you know, that being flexible for individuals that are dealing with caregiving responsibilities is also very important. And remote work can sometimes also help out you know, a situation. So, you know, putting that as an option in, you know, in your arsenal of support services that as an employer is a good one.
Okay, so this is interesting. I've got a question here because, again, Aborescence, we offer services to caregivers of people that live with mental health difficulties. And something that we really try to work on with the members of our organization is this idea of they, as caregivers, have a certain responsibility in the situation, but that the person that lives with a mental health difficulty, they also have responsibility to seek help, to do what they need to do in order to feel better. And so it's not that all of the responsibility falls on the caregiver's shoulders, or all of the responsibility falls on the person living with a mental health difficulty shoulders. It's this idea of trying to really work the relationship such that there's shared responsibility when and where, you know, each person has his or her own responsibility that comes back to him or her. And so if we kind of translate that into the workplace, Maude or Jennifer, I'd kind of like to hear you talk about, like, what is, or what are the responsibilities that come back to the employer, and what are the responsibilities that come back to the caregiver, because after all, they're the person that has the one living with mental health difficulty in their lives, and they're still employees, and we're in a workplace, and so talk to me a little bit about that balance of responsibility in the workplace.
Well, Maude, I don't know if you want to attack it first. Go for it.
I can go first today. So, well, the way we see it here is, well, and I think a way that makes sense to see it is that the employer has a responsibility to be prepared to receive and to listen and to be respectful of the caregivers in the workplace, of how, like, I don't know if it's clear what I'm trying to say, but if a caregiver comes forward to a superior to talk about their caregiving situation and how it's affecting their work, I think, like, the employer has a responsibility to be prepared to receive that with a non-judgmental approach, without giving advice or without trying to fix the situation that their employee is going through. So I think that's a responsibility that the employers have, and also to be able to redirect the caregiver to resources that could help in that situation. And also, I feel like it's the employer's responsibility to name the boundaries, or to name the limits of what they can do to accommodate the caregiver. So, for example, if we talk about a flexibility, sometimes in certain workplaces, remote work is not an option. So, to name and to clearly state that what the boundaries are, what the limits are of what they can do to support the caregiver is an important responsibility. And then it's the caregiver, the employee's responsibility to see if that works with them or not, and to seek out external help to support them in that situation, to find a balance that works for them. So I really see it as a shared responsibility.
Yeah, and I totally agree, Maude. In terms of the clarity, in terms of what you're able to do to support that employee is primordial. It can become a slippery slope if it's not well defined enough in terms of what the expectations of the employee are, and what the employer is willing to do in terms of support. So that's where I really go back to these, this employee manual that describes the what's available, and having the occasional difference from what's in the manual is okay, but regular is not acceptable. And and the employer, we always have to remember that the employer has to, if the employee is struggling to fulfill the obligations that they've been given within the organizations, the employer's got to help them strategize as to, okay, how are we going to make sure that you can get this done? So that's another role that the employer can play in terms of making sure that they help them figure out ways to manage their responsibilities at work, as well as their caregiving responsibilities.
Okay, so very interesting. What we're what I feel like I hear kind of coming out of this conversation is that employers seem to have a human responsibility before the caregiver of a person living with a mental health difficulty, to respond humanly with openness and Maude, you talk about non-judgmental attitude, understanding, empathy. And at the same time, on a professional level, it's sort of not a free for all either. Like, employers have, we have a job that we have to do, and so employers can continue to expect that the employee, even if this person is a caregiver and has certain additional responsibilities, and that we want to understand, that the person still has a job to do. And so kind of offering a human and understanding response, and at the same time coming in and putting in place a framework within which we're going to, and limits to what the employer can do. It seems that this is the kind of response that the employer can offer to a caregiver of a person living with mental health difficulties.
Yeah. And if I understand right, Cap Santé Mentale has some great resources that organizations can use. So this is a good time to maybe bring that up.
Absolutely. And so Cap Santé Mentale, I don't know who, I'll take that ball.
Take that, yeah.
And so, yes, Cap Santé Mentale is an association with more than 50 organizations working throughout the province, offering quality individual and group services to caregivers of people living with mental health difficulties. And really, one of the reasons why Cap Santé Mentale decided to do the campaign this year as concerns sort of caregivers in the workplace is because we talk about it so little, but employers know that there are resources that exist in your regions, and that there are perhaps things that can be done. And we'll talk here in a second maybe about some concrete actions or measures that can be taken. But referencing caregivers to these organizations that offer individual services, that offer group services, that is most definitely something that can be done. And I've been 9 years director at Adolescence, and so we know a lot of these organizations working in the field. These are good organizations, and we want to do work before caregivers maybe that we're not reaching, and so the workplace can be a place where we can sort of reach out to other caregivers to continue to support them in the difficulties that they may live.
And I'm really excited because Cap Santé Mentale has translated a toolkit that they have for employers. So it's on their website. You can see at the bottom of the page, the capsantementale.ca/English. It takes you to their webpage that has that toolkit that can be used in your organization that kind of, keeps this conversation going in your organization, and you can bring it back to your organization. So I highly recommend going to the website and looking at the toolkit.
Absolutely. And so Jennifer, do you want to talk to us a little bit more, maybe about some concrete actions or measures that can be taken by the employers?
Well, I think I've covered my toolkit with regards to what we have as an organization, but maybe a little bit about my journey in terms of how this has developed in my organization, because I think it might resonate with some of the other people that are watching. I would say mental health caregiving wasn't on our radar as an organization up until maybe maybe 6 years ago, before the pandemic. One of our colleagues, Ella Amir at Ami Quebec, did a conference on young caregivers, and it kind of woke me up with regards to, okay, yeah, there's more than just taking care of seniors. There's a cohort of young people that are primarily taking care of parents with either mental health or physical health. And that kind of woke up my thoughts around the needs of caregivers as being more than I thought, because we deal regularly with people caring for seniors and the needs of caregivers for seniors, and so that kind of made me change my perspective of what caregiving was all about. And then since the pandemic, mental health has become such an important increasing problem in society. And I'm seeing it more within my own organization, mental health issues becoming more and more, of a reality. And it really became concrete for me when I started looking into what an organization can do to support someone giving caregiving responsibilities. And I started looking at what the recommendations were from the government. And so I started implementing it and putting it into my HR policy, and went to my board and got permission to increase the personal days off for caregiving. It's a process within an organization. You can't just decide as a director, this is what you're going to do. You have to get the board of directors to sign off on it and rewrite the HR policy, and and then start implementing the conversation in your organization around mental health and caring for oneself, but also your responsibilities for caring for people with mental health in your own family. So as an organization, it's been like a long process. It's been over several years that this has become more and more of a reality in our organization. And I think that, as an employer, you shouldn't feel guilty that, oh my gosh, I haven't really paid attention to this, but take it as an opportunity to say, okay, I can do more in this area. I can put it into motion within my organization. And I think the tools that, Cap Santé Mentale are promoting here are excellent ones in terms of, getting it going within your organization. And I'm sure, as David mentioned, there's quite a few partners that work with Arborescence and Cap Santé Mentale that can provide some resources as well. So I think. I think you can use my organization as an example of it's something that you're gonna have to build into your organization slowly but surely, and like I said, it's a process that you know uh, acceptance within the organization and that comfort level of talking about your responsibilities is something that comes over time as well.
Yeah, no, and I will go ahead and put on my hat as an employer. And I think thank you so much for sharing, Jennifer, about your experience. I think that it's good for us to see companies or organizations that are kind of on the forefront, and that can set an example for us. And we're moving forward here. This is the first time that we've talked about caregivers and their reality in the workplace, and so it's great to have examples like that. And I think that sort of as an employer, again, as director of Arborescence, yes, we work in mental health. Obviously, we work with caregivers, and oftentimes in our interactions with other employers and other organizations, we so readily want tools and concrete measures, and it's normal, and there is much that can be done sort of on a concrete and practical level. I think that's something that we say, and this is what we've been talking about all along, is I think it's important for us to emphasize what can be done on a practical level and on a concrete level, accommodation and measures. But beyond that, if accommodation and measures are given, but the sort of the cultural side of our organization and the human side of our organization isn't on par with the measures that we're putting in place, it's going to kind of feel empty. And what we see is that it doesn't actually respond to the situation of people of care, in this instance of caregivers of people living with mental health difficulties. What really makes a difference? I'm going to give an example. I am also a caregiver in mental health, and there are ups and downs in that journey in life. And a couple of years ago, I was going through a little bit of a more difficult time period, and I had a conversation with the president of our organization, and she said, "You know what? This is kind of what Jennifer was saying. David, we trust you. We like the work that you do. Take the time that you need, or don't. Go see this person. Do whatever you need to do. What we want is for you to stay with us. We like working with you, and we understand that there are periods in life when this happens. And if you want to come and talk to me, please come and talk to me. I'm more than willing to do what I can to help you, but just know that I'm here to help." I never went back and had another conversation with her, and I was able from that point in time to continue doing my work, and I did my hours and was able to fulfill my responsibilities. But just knowing that was the perspective of my employer, that it was okay that if I took a couple 30 minutes off in the afternoon, or if I took an hour off, and that nobody was sitting there watching over my shoulder to make sure that I was like, that gave me sort of the mental and psychological space that I needed to go through these sort of difficult times. And even if it wasn't a measure that was put in place or an accommodation as per se, but it made all of the difference in the world in my day-to-day life and how I lived through that time period. And what happened at that moment in time, my employer became Arborescence became a protection factor for what I was going through, and wasn't a risk factor. Because I know there are many organizations that can become risk factors, and they can aggravate a situation that's already difficult for caregivers. And this is exactly what we're talking about. Well, at that moment in time, in one conversation with our president, that's probably a 20-minute long conversation, Arborescence became a protection factor for me when it came to my role as a caregiver. And absence was no longer a risk factor. And I think that's really kind of what we're trying to get at, and what's important, and goes beyond. It's important to put in measures in place, but it goes beyond that, and is what really responds to the emotional and relational needs of caregivers, as kind of Maude was talking about initially in the workplace.
And as you were talking there, David, it made me remember another approach that an organization can take is sort of to implement a wellness program for your team, and focus on what can we do to make our work environment better for you and more healthy, and in putting an emphasis on the wellness within an organization, you can sometimes break down the barriers about talking about the challenges that employees are facing. So, just by giving that message, it's okay to take care of yourself. We want you to stick around and work for us for a long time. I think that having that, attitude as an organization is a good one with regards to, how to start developing that environment that you want to create, where the employee feels they can speak about the challenges that they're facing, and that there'll be an opportunity to address it, maybe even, and I'm sure that there's a body of literature out there with regards to how to implement these wellness program ideas within your organization. Unfortunately, I'm not a specialist on that, so I can't help, but I'm sure that there are best practices, and those resources can be found on the internet, if not within even maybe Cap Santé's material on their website.
Well, and Jennifer, this comes back to kind of what Maude was talking about earlier, and that I think is the employer fulfilling his or her responsibility to provide an environment in which the employee can take care of him or herself. It's still the employee's responsibility to take advantage of those opportunities and to implement action to take care of him or herself. Obviously, one sort of can't go without the other. This is really where we need for employer to be acting and employee to be acting hand in hand to move towards healthier lifestyle, or to move towards better taking care of mental health in general, or caregivers of people living with mental health difficulties.
Yeah.
And if I can add to that, I feel like building an environment that's welcoming and that makes the employees feel like they can come and talk to the superiors doesn't automatically means that employees are going to come forward and talk to the superiors. But what I'm trying to bring in is that patience is important as well. And we can't force employees to come and talk to their superiors about what's difficult for them. It doesn't mean that the employers are not doing a good job at creating a safe space, a safe environment for their employees. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is that the result is not always going to be that some people are going to come forward and talk about what they're going through, but also that for the employees, knowing that they are working in a safe environment is a protective factor, even if they're not using that safe space.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that Mo, this is a great point that you bring up, and this is something that I kind of say when I offer services to organizations. It's that it's one thing to, Jennifer, you're talking about confidence and trust. These are things that we need to talk about, but it's not just talking about them that makes them become a reality. Trust and confidence, knowing that we navigate in a safe space. These are things that are sort of felt, that are lived out, that are experienced more so than talked about. It's like, we are now working in a safe space here. And yes, we want to talk about it, but it's not sufficient in and of itself.
And I think there's a really important message here, in that a lot of times we don't talk about it because we don't feel like we know what the answers are. There's the employer isn't going to be. We're not specialists in mental health, and what you need to do is what we are is out of an environment that recognizes, sorry, that the individual is going through difficult time, and we can support them in their in their initiatives to find the support they need. And I think that we just have to, as employers, um, start the conversation, even if you don't know what the answers are. I think that's the key thing. It's understanding that you don't have to be the expert in this. You just have to create an environment where it comes that the individual feels comfortable coming forward, and that they're not going to be penalized or thought of as set aside because they have too many responsibilities at home or whatever. And it's just important to talk about it in the workplace, and make sure it's part of the conversation, the challenges that people are facing. And I think it's how do you bring it up? What's the best way to bring up these types of conversations? And sometimes it's just taking the leap and doing a little bit of research in terms of what's the best way to do it, and then having an opportunity in your work environment to do it.
Yeah. And so, and listen, I'm gonna rebound one last time here, and I just saw that we've actually already delved into to time for questions. But this is great, Jennifer, what you're saying. And one thing that we encourage employers to do is oftentimes, because it is difficult to just say, hey, talk about what you're going through as an individual or as a caregiver here. You can do so. Oftentimes what we encourage employers or supervisors to do is to talk about their own situations, to not talk about them in a way that's going to compromise their position as a director or as a responsible or as a manager, but to be honest and authentic about what it is that maybe past experiences that they've gone through. Because when we're able to lead with our example, that's really what can open up doors for other people to join in on the conversation.
And I think, David, that I'm a living example of that. I had a whole lot of caregiver responsibilities. It wasn't mental health. It was, my in-laws. And my staff saw me, struggling to keep all the balls in the air while I'm trying to, pick up my in-laws off the floor and get them to the emergency room. And, I think that just watching me go through that process kind of opened up doors as well.
Totally. Well, so listen, we are a little bit late here on the period of questions, but do we have any questions from the public today? Would love to hear if you have any thoughts, any comments, any questions. We're all ears. Okay, we got something down over here. Okay, yeah. So we got a question that comes in here. Okay, we sort of already answered that one. I'm scrolling through some of these questions that we've received. Okay, so this might be a question for Jennifer or for Maud. During your presentations or training sessions in companies, how receptive are the participants? Do they tend to sort of open up about the topic, or do you notice certain forms of resistance? It's kind of the conversation that we were having a little bit, but any thoughts?
That's a tough one for me to answer. Mo, do you have a good example?
Well, I don't have like a concrete example, but I feel like it depends on the dynamic in the workplace of the participants, So, and I think also it depends on the role of the participants, as if they're employees or employers. Sometimes they're going to be really receptive and ask a lot of questions and try to understand how the information we're giving translates to their workplace and how they can use the tools that we provide to use in their workplace. Sometimes we feel resistance from participants when they feel like sometimes what we are discussing won't change anything, or when they feel like it's going to be hard to implement in their workplace. So I'm not sure what more I could say about that, though. But it depends. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I'll sort of jump into this as well, because like something that I feel like I have seen in our different interventions in workplaces is that, I mean, it comes back to sort of what we're talking about, this the general culture of an organization. If I navigate in an organization where there's finger pointing and where there's blaming, I'm probably not going to be too keen to open up about, hey, by the way, I'm also a caregiver in mental health. And, people can, I've seen people be afraid that maybe by doing so that's going to compromise their position in the company, or there are also lots of questions that come up about confidentiality. Is it okay for me to sort of talk about this? Is this information, that's going to be shared with others, or, and I have seen very contrary examples where participants, like I'm actually currently giving a series of workshops in a company, and participants are super involved. Even the director of the company, super involved, giving personal and individual examples of difficulties in mental health and the family outside of work, and the impact that it has on work. And so again, we were talking about that earlier, this idea of safe space and confidence and trust. I think a lot of these are really the kind of fundamental elements that are going to make it such that either people are going to be willing and participative or not. This can almost kind of be used as like a barometer, like a litmus test to determine, okay, do we have a culture in place where there is trust and where there is confidence? Because this is kind of a place where the rubber can hit the road or not in some senses.
And I think one of the sort of like low-hanging fruits is that there are posters made by Cap Santé Mentale that you can put up in your workspace. So, I mean, like just visual reminders that start conversations. Could be something that starts a conversation. So I mean, you can use some tools that are already out there. And I see I have a question. Do you have a wellness program for staff? I can't say I do. Isn't that terrible? I'd say that we have a very good dialogue within we're small. We're 15 people. People feel like they could come in my office as they needed. I do offer a lot of flexibility with time. We do have remote work that's possible, and I do have staff that are taking advantage of that. And we do have staff meetings that we always have a moment where we ask the staff to bring up concerns that they have. In a group, do they have questions that they want me to answer? I often have a ask me anything kind of moment in our staff meetings to make sure that people feel like they can ask me questions written on paper or verbally. And well, we just got a little bubble saying time's up, so I guess we'll have to leave it at that.
Yes, well, so listen, obviously we could have continued talking about this more. Would have loved to have had a little bit of extra time with you today, but that is all the time that we have. Maud McAllister from Arborescence, a psychosocial worker, Jennifer Johnson, executive director at CHSSN. I'm David Johnson, director of Arborescence, and it's been a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Have a good week, and we'll talk with you again shortly. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.